Here's a couple great questions from Sarah. And Sarah, I'm only going to read one just in the interest of time because there are so many others, but these are great. Sarah asks, how can we communicate these costs of climate change to our voters and policymakers? We need graphic sound bites that are visible and in the public square. This is a great question, and that's why it's wonderful that the Concord Coalition, which has always focused on fiscal policy and fiscal responsibility, is tackling this topic, making those connections. But Anne, how about you first? How can we communicate these costs to voters and policymakers?
Well, a few things. One would be to give Pat a microphone and bring him to your public square.
And let him talk for more than 10 minutes.
Let him talk.
On a train.
When I retired, they did actually give me a bullhorn. I should have brought it.
But I know some of you are going to say, well, I have a feeling Pat may be left of center. Just an inkling that that's possible.
Yeah, there you go.
So you might want to consider what some of the more middle-right organizations are saying, because there's many middle-right leaders who are actually saying, this is a problem and we got to do something about it. So I would investigate those and think about even having 2 spokespeople come in. I definitely would think that, no, Pat's really young, but even people younger, under 30, who are speaking out are crucially important. Living by example, doing open meetings in your town square, and really combining, I think, both the left and the middle right, and both the young and the old, with tangible examples of action and progress. I mean, we're talking a lot about bad news today. I get that. We're telling you the reality, and Pat's really good at that. But there are stunning examples of change that we really have to keep in mind, and we have to put the spotlight on those changes. We're going to win the win of the Inflation Reduction Act. Watch over the next 6 months. You're going to see projects, investment, catalytic investment in key red states where there are investment and projects and new jobs only because we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And those are going to be in districts and states where the lawmakers didn't vote for the bill, okay? But Kamala Harris is going to be there shaking their hands saying, we are all in this together. Pete Buttigieg is going to be there. Jennifer Granholm's going to be there saying, let's make this happen. So keep your eyes open, and I would celebrate around those and then ask yourself, how do we make this happen in New Hampshire? I mean, Brad's comments about New Hampshire are true. New Hampshire is a bit of an outlier. You can change that. You can change that.
You can change it, and it's not a coincidence that the big boosts in solar deployment and wind deployment have been in red states. Texas.
Yes.
For example. And, often
Iowa.
A climate solution is a solution to a lot of other problems. It is still the case, it's now the case that renewables are at parity or cheaper than fossil fuels, and yet that argument really doesn't get made. It's still the case, as it has been for a long time. There are a lot of energy efficiency advocates here who've been working on this in New Hampshire. It's still the case that the cheapest watt of electricity is the one you don't use, and yet the incentives for the utility industry are still to drive that peak up higher and higher. So when you hear people say, oh, well, electrification, the grid can't handle it. The fact of the matter is the peak electricity demand is twice what the average one is. That means if you could move that load around and reduce the overall load through energy efficiency, where there's still a huge opportunity. It's kind of lost its luster, I think, a little bit in the popular imagination. But it's still where there's an incredible climate solution, an incredible ratepayer pocketbook solution that's right in front of us.
Is that true, Don?
Yes. Said it better myself.
That's Don Kreese. How should I describe you, Don? Consumer advocate at the right.
And one of very few ratepayer advocates who really gets the fact that it's good for ratepayer. Energy efficiency spending is good for ratepayers. So thank you for your leadership.